Most people do not fully understand all the complex events that led up to Georgia, a traditionally Republican state, voting Democrat in both the presidential and Senate elections. Through many voting drives, support from prominent politicians, and being put on a national spotlight, major events happened in Georgia, which sparked federal change. Hello, my name is Nick Snyder, and today we are going to explore how and why Georgia had this change, and what its effects are on a state and federal level. In order to get a better understanding of how dynamic of a change the events in Georgia truly are, we must look back at time and how this has developed. Our story begins in 2018 with the Georgia gubernatorial race between former State House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams and Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Abrams won her primary with 76.44% of the vote against Stacey Evans, a Georgia State House member. Kemp won his primary with 69.45% of the vote against former Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle. When asked if she was worried that Kemp would lead a charge to restrict the vote amongst African Americans, this is how Stacey Abrams responded.
I was part of a coalition that sued him in 2016 to force him to stop using this process, and a federal judge agreed with us, said that he had unlawfully canceled more than 33,000 registrations, and they forced him to restore those registrations. In response, the Republicans passed a law in the 2017 legislative session to allow him to do it again. And so the challenge is twofold. One is that we know this is a flawed system that has a disproportionate effect on people of color, but it also has the ability to erode trust in our system. I know that Secretary Kemp is well aware of this, and it's part of a pattern of behavior where he tries to tilt the playing field in his favor or in the favor of his party. This should not require the erosion of public trust.
Are you confident this is going to be a fair election in November?
I am, and here's why. The 53,000 that we know about do have the ability to go and cast a ballot. The problem is it's a subjective system with 159 counties and thousands of precinct poll workers being asked to substantially verify. That's why this is problematic, because we are creating another set of hurdles for people who simply want to exercise their right to vote. But my organization, working with Democratic Party, we've put together the largest voter protection effort in the state's history, and we have national organizations that are also paying attention.
The final election between Kemp and Abrams ended up being very close, with Kemp claiming victory with 50.2% of the vote and Abrams losing with 48.8% of the vote. The following was Abrams' response.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
The story continues as we jump to Johnny Isakson, who was one of the current senators in Georgia at the time. Before getting elected in 2015, Johnny Isakson, then the U.S. Senator of Georgia's Class 3 seat, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. In 2019, however, Isakson, the longtime Georgia Republican, announced his resignation from his seat due to health reasons and made the following farewell speech to the Senate.
I am a bipartisan person. I never saw people get things done by not agreeing with each other. You have to come to agreement. I made a living selling houses. You can't ever solve a problem if you got two people and they won't agree to a price and agree to a time to move. You have to find common ground. Same thing with the law. You can't pass a law, you can't solve a problem. But bipartisan doesn't mean that a Democrat and a Republican talk to each other every once in a while. It means this, that it means that two people come together, probably have differences, probably have a lot of differences, but they find a way to get to the end of the trail where there's a possibility of a solution. And then they do the things you have to do to get that position. America's today is built on people who found a way to get to that end of the solution.
Whenever a senator retires, the governor must appoint someone to fill the vacant seat. Re-enter Brian Kemp, the recently elected governor of Georgia. After a week of thinking, Kemp decided to appoint Kelly Loeffler, a businesswoman and co-owner of WNBA's Atlanta Dream, to the vacant Senate seat. She had not held public office beforehand. Kemp made the following announcement.
Today, I'm proud to announce that conservative businesswoman and political outsider Kelly Loeffler will be Georgia's next U.S. Senator.
It was around this time that a special election for November 3rd, 2020 was announced for the seat, along with the regularly scheduled election for the Class 2 seat, held at the time by fellow Republican David Perdue. It was here that Abrams saw potential to use her nonprofit to spark major changes throughout each of these elections. Through her hard work, reaching out and encouraging people to vote, Abrams was able to drive up voter participation and pave the way for Joe Biden's Electoral College victory in Georgia. This in turn helped Biden defeat Trump in the election and become president.
Simon, let's start with that Georgia recount and the latest on vote finalization. Where do things stand currently?
Well, I mean, the Georgia recount is complete. It was conducted by hand. It didn't use any of the voting machines that the Trump campaign lawyers have made entirely unsubstantiated claims about over the last day or so, Sally. And it shows no significant difference in the outcome of the election in Georgia. Joe Biden won the state.
In the primary for the regular Senate election, Jon Ossoff, a former investigative journalist and filmmaker, won the right to go up against David Perdue. In the general election, neither Ossoff nor Perdue crossed that 50% majority threshold of voters, so the election then went to a runoff scheduled for January 5th. In the special election, Pastor Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler ended up being the top two finishers in the November 3rd general election, and thus advanced to the runoff, also scheduled for January 5th. In the November 3rd election, the Dems gained one seat, moving their threshold to 4850 in the Senate, thus meaning that if both Ossoff and Warnock could pull out victories, it would trigger a Democratic Senate majority. In the one debate that Ossoff and Perdue had before the January 6th runoff, Perdue refused to show up, and this is how Ossoff responded.
At this moment of crisis, is your senator feels entitled to your vote. Your senator is refusing to answer questions and debate his opponent because he believes he shouldn't have to. He believes this Senate seat belongs to him. This Senate seat belongs to the people. With early voting beginning on December 14th, I want to urge everybody to make a plan to vote. David Perdue has been getting rich in office. And instead of taking public health expertise and guidance from the CDC and getting that to the people and implementing in policy, he was buying up shares in manufacturers of vaccines and medical equipment, and he's not here because he's afraid he may incriminate himself in this debate.
On the night of January 5th, the result of the special election was called by NBC News. With Warnock's victory in the special election runoff, he unseated Loeffler and set the Senate count to 4950, thus meaning that if Ossoff could pull off the victory against Perdue, the Dems could secure a majority in the Senate with the help of Kamala Harris's VP tie-breaking vote. Ossoff would end up claiming victory early in the morning of January 6th, but NBC News and most other major news outlets would not make the call until midday in the midst of the riot and chaos.
Wanted to note this. While we were listening to the president-elect earlier, NBC News called the second of the two Georgia Senate races, after hours and hours of being sure and counting and waiting, for Jon Ossoff. That means, take this to its logical extension, that while they were under security detail shelter in place, Mitch McConnell became, in effect, the minority leader designate. Chuck Schumer became, in effect, the majority leader designate.
In conclusion, as a result of all that happened in Georgia, Stacey Abrams' efforts through her nonprofit to spark Joe Biden's win in the presidential election, Jon Ossoff's win in the regular Senate election, and Raphael Warnock's win in the special Senate election, led to the Democrats gaining a majority and having an easier time trying to push legislation through. Hopefully, the Democrats and the Republicans can work together, and with this 50-50 advantage, maybe voices from both parties can come out and help to push legislation to benefit the entirety of the American people.